Rachael, can you talk about your interest in family violence and disaster?
I'm interested in family violence and natural disaster because I suppose I've been working at the pointy end of family violence for many years, and working for Women's Health Goulburn North East, the research we've conducted and it's coming out internationally is that family violence obviously increases after a natural disaster. And I suppose as a social worker in that response way, it's about how we can actually keep women and children safe post a natural disaster.
So can you tell us about family violence after a natural disaster?
In terms of family violence after natural disaster, the rates of the reports and incidents increase, and what we know is that it's often pre-existing the natural disaster. So you've got, more often than not, many years of abuse have preceded that natural disaster, and after the natural disaster, it's exacerbated the violence and abuse. What we also know is that there are often new instances of abuse and violence post the natural disaster, and I'm particularly focusing on in the context of intimate partner relationships there when I say that. And that's what we need to be really seriously looking at in terms of how we keep women and children safe.
So why do you think there's this increase in this exacerbation of family violence after disaster?
I think the reasons why there is an increase is that we know that after or during the natural disaster, men and women go into their very stereotypical roles. So women will go and will do the sandwiches, we'll grab the kids, we'll look after the dogs and the pets, we'll go into that sort of protecting, I suppose, and nurturing role and looking after role. Usually everybody else bar ourselves. And men end up going back into very traditional roles of protecting and providing. And what happens there is those roles are so extreme that and what we expect of men and women is very gendered and very separate, and women go into nurturing roles and men go into protecting. And what happens after that is that men don't know how to cope with that trauma, and they're not taught to actually talk about it and relate well after that. So that's where we see an increase of I suppose abuse and violence within those intimate partner relationships.
So Rachael, can you tell me one of the what is seen as one of the basic causes of family violence?
We know that the determinants of violence against women, and in particular intimate partner violence, is that it's really about men's sense of entitlement and about a rigid belief in gender role separation. Men are to be doing this and tough and protectors, and women are to be in the kitchen and doing those type of nurturing roles.
Okay, so what needs to be done to increase the awareness of family violence, and who needs to do it?
I think it's all of us. I think it's all of us as any community. We need to all be aware of what the local services can offer and how to actually respond. We need to stop actually putting it under the carpet, and we need to actually identify it when we see it. And I think training for those responders, those first responders, before a natural disaster even occurs is really, really important in identifying. And obviously it's also important to make sure that the family violence services actually know that they are going to see an increase after a natural disaster, and what are they going to do to actually meet that need.
So, Rachael, what actions could be taken differently by responsible authorities?
So some of the actions that we could do differently are particularly around how we actually provide information about what's available. So in your community centre or your shelter, that everybody gets a bag of information on what services are available. Men, women and children get a bag, and in that bag it's about how to keep healthy, and it's about where family violence services are, and also in terms of what is abuse. What is abuse and what is violence, and what does that mean for me in my family life as well? So we can do that in a universal way, but we can also pick it up individually and actually take people aside and say, are you actually safe? Because from what I've observed, things aren't going well, and I've observed someone intimidating you. Can I help you? And are you feeling safe? Are you safe? I think that's really important.
A lot of these services would say that they have no connection to family violence at all. They offer very practical services. It's not their core business at all. So, and there's also a fear of them becoming involved in family violence cases. What would you say to them?
I suppose the one thing is that it's really about demystifying family violence, because as a social worker I had no idea what to do. I didn't know whether you talked to someone about it when I noticed something was happening or whether you didn't. Did you make them unsafe if you did? And it's about demystifying it and saying, actually, you need to ask the question, are you safe? And you can actually help by just providing that information. And actually, you don't need to be involved in the case. You don't need to do anything more than actually pick it up and actually give information when you can, and when you can in a safe way.
So, Rachel, do you have an example of when attention to gender had negative consequences, or alternatively, when it had positive consequences?
I think in the training that I've done, it's been really quite confronting, particularly for men that have been, in the emergency services world or in the police force, and they see family violence as being something that isn't happening in their communities, and I think what we need to do, and I've actually seen particular gentlemen come to a number of trainings that we've provided, and they've actually. They were very resistant at the start, and towards the end they were engaged. They were talking about gender, and they were talking about gender role stereotypes, and they were actually getting the understanding about the fact that it happens more to women and children in the context of intimate partner relationships. And so to see someone actually change their worldview has been amazing, and I think we need to see more of that with what we do.
One final question. You talk about the training. Who is that aimed at?
The Family Violence After Natural Disaster training package that we developed is really for emergency service staff, Red Cross workers, volunteers, community members, caseworkers who potentially will be going into these communities after a natural disaster. And they're the ones that can actually identify family violence and make sure that there's a conduit about who the local services are, and when people are in a crisis, who can they ring, which is really important information that women and children and men need.